Hurry, time is running out. On January 31st, Disney stopped selling these classic videos.
If you grew up in the 80s, 90s, or even 2000s, you may have some idea of the Disney Vault. A vault that didn't have a physical location, but a marketing concept that Disney would intentionally release and withhold certain titles from being purchased and viewed at home. Think of it like seasonal Fortnite skins. The Disney Vault didn't have its origins with home video. The idea of it actually came early on. In the mid-40s, Disney started something novel at the time, and that was re-releasing their own movies into theaters. It started with Snow White, and they would have a somewhat reoccurring schedule where every few years the film would be released back into theaters, as this was the only way audiences could view it. They would continue this trend with films like Bambi, Peter Pan, and Cinderella, creating what would be the first iteration of the Disney Vault. If you missed it the first time, you literally had to wait for it to come back. That cycle created something we don't really have anymore, and that is shared anticipation. This slightly changed in the 80s with the rise of home video. Suddenly movies didn't need to come back into theaters to stay alive, they could just live in your house. And that's where the Disney Vault system really evolved. Instead of constant availability, Disney started intentionally controlling access, releasing films on VHS or DVD for a limited window before pulling them back into the vault. Mark Elliott, a name you may not know despite his voice having a large part of your childhood, narrated these commercials to make it sound almost ceremonial, like these films were being sealed away until further notice.
Get these timeless classic Disney videos before time runs out.
And it worked because scarcity changes perception. When you think that something can disappear, it makes it feel all that much more valuable. Now, I personally have many strong memories associated with these commercials and the Disney Vault, and anytime a conversation like this comes up, I have to stop myself from diving fully into the back in my day type of person. But it truly was a real thing where you were just forced to rewatch the same movies over and over simply because that's all you owned. And now I have kids who watch Disney Plus, and of course children in general just like to rewatch the same things, but the difference is my kids are doing it because they enjoy it, not because they have to, because they have much more access to entertainment than I ever did growing up. When you were a kid, movies did feel like this weird sense of currency, where certain friends owned certain titles and you would go to their house because you knew you could watch that movie there. As a kid, I wasn't even sure what films fully existed. Some of them felt like just rumors, and it wasn't until I finally got Disney Plus that I was able to see the full catalog for myself. And that's where the next chapter of this story goes. In 2019, Disney Plus launches. And for the first time, the vault doesn't just open, it stops mattering entirely. Everything is available instantly. No cycles, no urgency. And that changes something subtle but important. You stop valuing timing. Not because the content is worse, but because nothing feels like it needs to be experienced right now. It's always just there. Nowhere is this shift clearer than Star Wars. For years, Star Wars was built around rarity. A film would come out, dominate culture, and then disappear into legacy, but Disney Plus changes that entirely. Instead of spaced out event-based storytelling, we get continuous expansion. And the clearest example of this is what's happening right now with the new Mandalorian film. The Mandalorian started as one of the strongest launches for Disney Plus. It worked because it felt focused, contained, and intentional, but now it's expanded into something larger, more interconnected, and increasingly tied into a broader streaming ecosystem. And that's where this shift becomes noticeable. As I was watching this film, I couldn't help but notice it just felt like an extended episode from the show I've already seen. And even in the marketing leading up until its release, I didn't feel this sense of urgency to go see it. And the more that I processed this, the more I realized that I had been conditioned to understand that this character of the Mandalorian is something I see on my TV, not in a movie theater. Critiques with the film aside, it didn't feel like a standalone cinematic event. It felt like just another chapter of this larger story. And I have to wonder if Disney overestimated what they were doing by blurring the line so much where their TV shows become cinematic and their movies feel episodic. And obviously the other franchise that reflects this pattern is Marvel. Shows like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier might have felt special at first, mostly due to it being our first MCU content since the pandemic started, but I do have to wonder if the disappointing box office with a film like The Marvels is partly due to people viewing it as a sequel to a streaming show. Because similar, Mandalorian and Grogu hit theaters and unfortunately has the lowest opening box office weekend for a Disney-era Star Wars film. And obviously there is a much larger conversation to be had about streaming services and how they are affecting movie theaters. Because it is undeniable at this point that streaming has changed the way that we view movies. Theater windows used to guarantee a period of exclusivity. If you wanted to see something, something, you had to go. Now that that window is much shorter and less predictable, studios are constantly adjusting it. But different from when Warner had that phase when they were simultaneously releasing in theaters and on HBO Max the same day, I think Disney Plus has created their own issues with storytelling becoming so intertwined between movies and television. Because me, alongside many other people, have been conditioned to think it will be on streaming eventually, because Disney Plus is where I see characters like the Mandalorian. So urgency just completely disappears, and when urgency disappears, theaters start to feel optional. And you can probably tell I have personal tied to this. I remember when the Star Wars prequels hit theaters, and I was there day one in the theaters for the first Iron Man film. But as these brands have become more overexposed into our lives, I can't help but feel like they are just not important like they used to be. I'm not saying that this is a permanent change or that everyone who is watching this content feels the same way, but I do think that Disney was onto something with the Disney Vault and recognizing that limiting what people can watch will make it feel more magical, will make it feel more special, and will create the sense of urgency that now is the time I have to watch this thing.